Hi everyone, welcome back to The Hub, our weekly look at all things politics. And first of all, let me introduce our guest for this show. We have Adrian Cruz, who is the chairman of the Commission on Decolonization and a lifelong Democrat. We have the former chairman of the Republican Party of Guam, Mr. Phil Flores, the president and CEO of the Bank Pacific, and our regular guest analyst, Dr. Ron McNinch, professor at the University of Guam. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
We've got a lot to discuss. I can't believe tomorrow is the day already upon us. So let me just start out with the only public poll that I've seen of the Democratic gubernatorial race, which will be, I guess, the primary feature tomorrow, has been from the Anthology Group out of Hawaii, which has a subsidiary here, QMark, and it was commissioned by the Lou and Josh campaign. And so that poll has the results at 16-point lead for Lou and Josh. So I wanted to get your comments on that, and let me start with you, Adrian.
Well, I mean, the campaign has been a long and arduous journey. Democrats have come out to start our push to retain the administration. And I think it shows where the people of Guam are sitting and how they feel about the current administration, or if they were going to change it for another administration, but stick within the Democratic side of the House. And we can see all the good things that that party has done so far.
All right. And Phil, of course, every poll is a snapshot in time, right? And I believe this one was in early August.
Yeah.
How much credence do you put to those results?
Well, it wasn't really a poll. It was a push poll. And if you looked at the questions that were posed before you were asked again for whom you're going to vote, it's obviously that was all aimed towards Lou and Josh. God bless them for pulling that off, making some people believe like it was independent, but it was not. And I'd be concerned on their side because only Democrats are allowed to vote, that they only got 52% of the Democrats. Or it was so rigged that they only were ahead by 16. That's what I think about that poll.
All right, Ron. Phil thinks it was rigged. What are your thoughts?
I think that in general, when political campaigns make a poll, the classic response is for the other campaign to do their own poll. And so I think that kind of back and forth is part of the normal political banter, only using other means. So.
Okay. That's very. But what about the results, though? It suggests, of course, a big lead by Lou and Josh over Mike and Bree. Do you believe that?
I think that this race is going to boil down to what happens tomorrow. I think that a lot of people early voted. I think that we don't know what those numbers say. Mm-hmm. We have no idea what the turnout's going to be. I mean, there's all kinds of little variables that are going to affect. And people try to pin it down to a particular number. I don't believe that polls predict anything. I think it takes voters voting to make results.
That's right. Okay. The proof's in the pudding. Tomorrow we're going to see
what
the real answer is.
Well, we have agreement across the board.
You know, and to be fair, people say all kinds of things in polls. People can say whatever their opinion is, but what they do inside that ballot box is anybody's guess.
Yeah, especially when you get a phone call, you don't know who really is calling you. And if you're a government employee, of course you're going to say something that you think the governor wants to hear, or whatever the case. But I do think there's excitement out there that we haven't seen for a long time. And as long as it's not pouring rain all day, I think we're going to get a great turnout.
Well, speaking of turnout, the Election Commission Board had a meeting yesterday afternoon, and Maria Pangilinan told the board that they've had over 58,000 registered voters for the primary, which was just maybe literally a handful shy of the 2002 record. Something about 5 or 6 registered short of the record. So that would suggest to me that there is going to be a pretty good turnout tomorrow.
I hope so.
What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, that's great for all of us. I think everybody on this panel can agree that when people get out and actually exercise their democratic right to express themselves and choose the leaders that they want, I think we all win. We all win when that happens, because democracy is not a spectator sport. It's not something that we can just talk about on TV, that we can complain about with our friends. It has to be something that we actually get ourselves dirty in. And that means actually going out and doing the work, being informed as a voter, going out and choosing the team that you think is going to represent how you want to see the island move forward. We all win when that happens.
Yeah, and you're going to go further to your point. You mentioned complain. If you don't vote, you can't complain.
That's right.
Because you have your chance to complain in the ballot box or to reward in the ballot box. And if you don't go to the ballot box, then you don't really care enough. And there's two fellows came over for last work, my air conditioner at home, and they were in their 20s. And I asked them, hey, who you guys voting for? They're not registered. I said, wow, how could you not be registered? Yeah. And maybe as they get a little bit older, they'll register. But really, if you're registered, you got to vote tomorrow.
I think it's even more than that. I think if you don't vote, you don't count. That's the reality. I mean, your voice doesn't count at all unless you actually vote. And tomorrow, there's a lot of choices people can make. I mean, you have a bunch of people on the Democrat legislative ticket. There's a great contrast among the Republican tickets. I'm very impressed with, on both sides, just the legislative candidates. We have a good diversity of legislative candidates on both the Republican and Democrat slates this election. So there's a lot of neat things to vote for tomorrow.
Yeah, let me just say that I think the focus tomorrow is clearly going to be on the Democratic gubernatorial tickets. Is any one of either one of those more benefited by a high turnout?
Again, I think the fact that people are going out to vote is great for everybody, because in reality, the way our politics is going to turn out at the end of all of this is really going to be a reflection of our community. It's going to be where we are, rich and poor, young and old. These are the kinds of interests that we put in. So you mentioned about all the variety of senatorial candidates. Those are little snapshots of parts of the community. And I think although people are really focused on the gubernatorial race, that legislative race is just as important.
Sure.
Because the legislature is really what's going to set the tone of how the government is really going to move forward, the kinds of bills that are going to go through, how spending is going to occur. And I think we shouldn't discount or minimize the effect of how these 15 people are going to make decisions for an entire island, Republican and Democrat. And so I think that's something we really need to pay attention to, because where that money goes and how it's spent is really the kicker in everything.
Phil, I know you're representing the Republicans here, but do you think a high voter turnout benefits Lou and Josh or Mike and Bree?
Golly, that's really a hard one to answer. I think Mike, and because Lou's got her base, and she had a certain amount of people coming out for her 4 years ago, and she'll grow that a little bit. As governor, you attract more people, hired more people, that type of stuff. But if all of a sudden it goes way over, if our turnout is much higher than it was 4 years ago on the Democratic side, I think that would benefit Mike. I ask people who's going to win, and some people tell me Mike, and I'm going, oh, I just don't see that, because I don't see Mike. And Lou's so well organized, and she has so much money. I mean, people felt that they had to give her over $1 million, and she spent more than everybody else, like combined 5 or 6 times. And that doesn't even count the ads in the paper for this program or that program paid for by the government. But I think she's going to prevail.
Yeah. Ron?
I think that the fundraising speaks a lot for where things are, and the governor certainly has the powers of the incumbency. They've certainly raised a lot of money, and they spent the money. That is, they haven't just stockpiled it. They've actually bought ads. They've done all the things that a normal candidate would do at this point.
They didn't keep it in the bank?
Not.
Oh, sorry.
That's,
Behave there, Phil. Behave.
well, I was going to say certainly not Bank Pacific, but anyway,
We do have some Democrats in banks.
but yeah, of course, and I think that in general, the turnout, I think, will be a normal primary turnout. Primaries are generally a little bit less than the general, but I think that there's a lot of neat excitement in this race, and I think a lot of people are going to vote, and I think that in general, there's just a lot to look forward to tomorrow, and you never know how things are going to turn out. You know, there are always ideas that people have before elections, and one other thing I'll mention very, very briefly, and that is people underestimate just what an emotional thing or set of things go on for candidates in these races. It's really emotionally taxing for them, and I empathize with them quite often. It's not easy to run for office. If it were easy, everybody would do it.
That's right.
Yeah. Not to relate this to the national election, but you talk about what brings voters out, right? And from what is being reported on the national scene, the abortion issue is bringing out the Democrat base more so than the Republicans, and the Democrats are taking advantage of that, making that one of the primary campaign issues because it brings out voters that may not otherwise have come out. Is there an issue here that you think might be responsible for this increase in the primary, or is that just kind of an organic thing?
Well, you know, the thing is that we live in a time of flux, right? We just got out of a pandemic. Things are starting to pick back up. And I think people, and rightly so, are really feeling the urgency of, well, where do we go from here? You know, you have to make your next move. After the typhoon, we have to decide how we're going to trim this tree that's been, fell apart. And you gotta do it well, because how you trim that tree is going to determine whether that tree is still going to be fruitful, whether you're going to have to cut it down altogether. It's a time of change, and so I'm glad that a lot of people are realizing how much this election is going to impact the next chapter of Guam moving forward. So
That's very well put. And to carry that metaphor a little bit further, see, it's also when you trim that tree, you got to make sure the branches, which are heavy, don't fall and
That's right.
break something on the way down when it hits the ground. But we're a pretty political community as it is. We typically have better turnouts than a community our size somewhere in California, whatever. And so it doesn't surprise me that there's going to be good turnout tomorrow. As we said, we're all welcome because that's Guam.
Yeah.
I mean, the only place that's more political than Guam is Saipan or Palau.
Yeah, they're having an election too, but not a primary. But so what do you think, Ron?
So normal U.S. Mainland turnout, you're lucky to get in the 30s, early 40s. On Guam, we have the 50s and 60s, so certainly we have a lot more turnout than other places. I think people vote here, though, based on emotional connections, and I think that there's a strong feeling that people want to return to normalcy, the normality of elections. And elections are a form of, we don't have seasons here, we don't have political seasons here. I'm sorry, we don't have weather seasons here, but we do have political seasons, and so those seasons help us to mark time very importantly. And I think that these emotional connections come at peak, and we feel, unlike a lot of other people in the U.S. mainland, that we actually know a lot of these candidates. That's what makes Guam and the Saipan and Palau cases different, is we feel that personal connection, and that emotional personal connection really matters.
Yeah. Sticking with the gubernatorial, and we'll get to the legislative and congressional races in a bit, but Phil raised the issue of campaign spend and the fact that Lou and Josh have this huge lead over Mike and Bree in terms of what they have spent, what apparently. Is that kind of the deciding factor, you think, in the election?
Well,
how
here's
much
the
you're
thing.
able to spend on it?
It's part of the American experience in the way that politics is run, in that the first part of a candidate announcing themselves, putting their ideas out there, is to galvanize support. I mean, if you don't have ideas that are going to attract people in one of the most important parts of themselves, which is their wallets, to give you money, well, then you're not probably going to go so far. You're not going to be able to carry that message out to a wider audience. And so I think it speaks about the energy, it speaks about the support when a candidate is able to raise that kind of support to get their message out and to galvanize their supporters.
Phil, you've been on the political scene for a long, long time. Is he who raised the most money the one who is going to win?
No,
No?
not at all. It's he or she who presents the issues that the people are looking to.
That's right.
And God bless Lou, but yeah, she started raising money a few years ago, and it's a very impressive war chest she has put together. I must say that. Mike, I haven't really seen Mike around, and people are saying, okay, it's on social media, but what do you do to attract the voter who's not on social media as much as the other person is? And every once in a while I see somebody waving, or I'll give Sabrina a call, say, how you doing? Because I know it's hard for her to be in her first campaign. And she said to me one time, when she's getting ready for that first time, I think July 20th, it would go head on head with Josh. She said, I've never done anything like this. I said, well, that's what Babe Ruth said before he hit his first home run. And so she's learned a lot, and she's matured a lot on this campaign. I have seen that. But no, raising money is very, very important. As long as you're not strong-arming people.
Yeah. Campaign spend, Ron. Where do you place its importance in this particular primary?
Well, of course, just to harken back to a quick national example, Hillary outspent Trump 2-1. She raised well over $1 billion. Trump raised less than half that and ends up winning. And so you're absolutely right. You can't always count on raising more money. However, what raising money shows, it's much more than just simply raising money. It shows that you're more organized. It shows that you have a network. It shows that you have a structure. It shows that you have an effort, that you have a determination. And so fundraising matters much more than simply the amounts that we raise. The activity itself really matters. And what has not happened yet, and it's going to happen after the primary, is the Republican gubernatorial candidate's going to charge up fundraising efforts in the exact same ways the Democrats did, and then it's game on.
All right. Okay, we're going to take a short break and raise some money for us. We'll be back with more of our fascinating discussion right after this. All right, we're back with the Hub and more with our guest this morning. Wanted to focus now on what issues are resonating most with the voters and which of the gubernatorial campaigns were able to get out their message the best, Adrian?
Well, I think what resonates the most with the voters is how we're going to rebuild our economy and what we're going to do and the plans that are going to be made and what kind of investments are going to be made into the island now that we have all this money around. We are getting things back up and roaring and firing it up. So I think everybody is really paying attention, and this is what really is driving voters to become involved.
I don't think Phil's going to dispute. Is it the economy, Phil?
The economy is a big deal because it's good and it's bad for the governor, because a lot of people who feel, rightfully or not, that she put them out of work, destroyed their businesses. And the economy is coming back slowly. It's not booming. And tourism's still a year or so away. I think crime is a really big deal, and drugs. When you're afraid to leave your house at night, like over not too far from here last week, some guy goes outside in the yard and comes back. He'd been hit with a machete, loses part of his brain. And every day, I'll tell you what's in the paper tomorrow. There's somebody's been robbed, somebody's been beaten, there's been spousal abuse, there's going to be a minor that was inappropriately assaulted, and 5 guys busted for meth. That to me is a real big deal, because I live in Tumon, and you see crime walking along the street there, and that's where it's going to deter our tourism industry.
Yeah. Initially, Ron, I was thinking pocketbook issues would drive this election, but I think I tend to agree with Phil that crime has kind of surpassed those pocketbook issues right now, because there has been so much, and it's not just your petty crime, it's violent crime.
And I think the two issues go kind of hand in hand, right? They do have an effect on each other as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's derivative. I think that basically what we've done is we've had people cooped up for almost 2 solid years, and as they're coming out, they're interacting more, and it's creating these really negative experiences that end up being highlighted as far as the criminal aspects. But I think that in general, what this election really is about is a return to normalcy, and that's what at least at the post-primary phase, it's going to be all about getting back to normal, getting back on our feet, and which leader who is going to be able to do that the best. To me, that's what this election's about.
Adrian, Ron brings up a point. Do you think the governor's handling of the pandemic has been a key issue in the campaign?
Well, I think we have to remember that the real problem was the global pandemic. I can't find a jurisdiction in the world that wasn't affected by this, right? And are you ever going to find like a perfect leader that did everything wonderfully? No, it doesn't exist. You're gonna have to work with what you have, and I think with what we had on Guam, the governor did what she thought was best, for better, for worse. Some people think, she did a great job. Some people did not. But the point is that we've made it through. We're at the point where we are, and you have to, if you want to know where anybody is going to go, all you have to do is look at the things that they've done, and that applies, as in life, same to politics. Remember that all the candidates are people. We like to sort of take away their humanity or the fact that governments are run by groups of people. We forget that. We think that it's some kind of like monolithic machine that has some kind of one mind, but that's not the way things work. And so it's this idea that you have these people, and these are the decisions that they've made, and for better or for worse, this is how we're going forward. And if you agree with that, then that's something you need to support. If we sit here and bicker about how you could have handled, hindsight is 2020. We could have done a lot of things differently, but that's not where we are right now. We're looking for the future, and if we don't focus our vision on that, and keep arguing about the things that happened, we're not going to get very far, right? We're going to be like we're in a car and arguing about which turn we should have taken when we really need to go to our destination now. So,
Phil, do you think the
Did that yesterday. Taking the wrong turn.
see what I mean?
Phil, do you think the handling of the pandemic was fresh in the voters' mind, or was a consideration of the
Oh
voters?
yeah, because there was outright panic in the community, and I think panic within the government too. And the roadblocks, speaking about the wrong turn, the roadblocks should not have been done. There are several things that you're right, 2020, but there's some things that just shouldn't have been done. But people didn't realize really what the pandemic was. I mean, we were predicting 20,000 deaths, and the death rate, God bless anybody who's lost a friend or a family member, but death rate is very, very low. It's less than 1%. And now somebody's going to be upset when you see in the paper that a 75-year-old or 80-year-old died COVID related. Well, that's what 80-year-old people do. They die. I can say that because I'm 73, but that's what happens. To get over. But I will say this, because one of our companies is Our Lady of Peace. Actually, it's two of those companies. And our Monday meeting this week, we were going over our cases, and we haven't got a COVID-related case in quite a while, whereas before we were getting a lot. And so when we were getting a lot, and every day you looked at the PDN, the top of the full story was about COVID, and it just take it away, because it's just scaring people, and things could always be done better, and there were things that could have been done better, but I gotta stay with Adrian. We made it through, and part of that again is because we are a community.
That's right.
Ron, the handling of the pandemic, you think that's a big deal for the electorate?
What if the governor didn't handle it right? Imagine where we'd be today. And so I think that's what the big question is. And there's an old saying, those that attack must vanquish, those that defend must merely survive. And so at the general election phase, it's going to be a back and forth between the Democrats and Republicans over this issue, in part because the governor will be able to justify or explain what her choices were, and then the other side can explain their side of it. And so this is going to be a give and take issue in the general election, certainly. But also, I think that, and I want to mention something about the roadblocks. The only people who got caught by the roadblocks were people willing to line up for the roadblocks. If you know Guam, anybody would have known the alternative route, not to get stuck in the roadblock. I stopped in the
Well, they do that now for the police.
Right, of course. So I
The
stopped.
checkpoint.
I stopped in the roadblock just to experience it. I wanted the full COVID experience.
Yeah.
So I had the National Guard guy read me this stuff, and I felt bad for the National Guard person because I know they didn't want to be there. And
No.
that was-
I don't think anybody wanted to
That's
be
right,
anywhere, to
that's
be
right.
fair.
No,
And Phil and I are in the funeral business, and so sort of to put this into perspective, the number one cause of death on Guam is like heart attack and diabetes related, right? And that's about 500 and something a year. Now, when you have this extra brand new thing that kills almost the same amount of people, for a small island with limited resources, well, that can be a little concerning for people. And you're right, at the very beginning, and nobody knew anything, there was panic. Like all things new. This is just human nature, and so of course, when people panic, we do things to try to comfort ourselves. We do things to try to protect ourselves as best that we know how. And like I said, hindsight is 20/20. Things change. Things were augmented as they went along, and we are where we are now. We're all here on this panel. And really, the focus has to be where are we going to go from here?
Okay. I think too also, except if you're out of a job right now or you lost your business and, out of sight is out of mind. That was all 2 years ago, and people would pretty much forget about it.
One more question on the Democratic gubernatorial before we move on to legislative and congressional. Reconciliation after this primary, is that too soon to ask about that? Will the Democrats be able to reconcile?
Well, we have to remember the statutes of the Democratic Party, and one of that is that should you lose a election, that you will go on to support the members of your party. Now, whether people are going to do that, right? I mean, you can't compel people to and like Ron said before, these are really emotional things, right? People really invest not only their time but their reputations, their families, their connections with friends. It's not to be taken lightly. This is not a game, and we'll have to see. I'm not Nostradamus. I cannot pick what people will do.
Phil, you're smiling. History tells us otherwise.
History tells us much different than that. But it's not a game, but in Guam, it is a sport, and people will switch sides. And the unfortunate part is Ron was saying how personal running for office is. To me, everybody in that election tomorrow is a victor. Unfortunately, some of those victors are going to get fewer votes than the others, and they're not going to make it to the general ballot, whether it be the gubernatorial race, the delegates race, or the legislative races. And they're going to feel hurt. They're going to take it personally. They're going to feel depressed. And they're going to take it like my girlfriend has just broken up with me, or my wife has just left me, and what I do wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. You just didn't get as many votes. So I think that if I was on the other side, I'd immediately go to whoever got the fewer votes and give them a hug.
Yeah. Democratic reconciliation? What do you think?
Do Democrats ever get along? I mean, no offense, but that's even Democrats themselves kind of sort of joke like that. But I have to
It's
say,
the key to our victories.
And by the way, Republicans rarely get along either. You should have seen the Republican majorities back in the day.
Let's not go
And
there.
so I mean, but basically, I think that the main thing is there's an assumption or an idea that these people vote in gaggles or blocks, and that's not true. There is no, this vote or that vote. There are individuals, and the messaging and the imaging has to be down to the individual level. And you're absolutely right. You have to, reach out and bring the other sides in. Both sides have to do that after the primary election, and that's an old game. The key fundamental issue when we study these splits and why people either turn on their party or not turn on their party is whether they view their brethren as being fair or not. Right. So if they feel that there's dirty politics, then they won't go with their party. If they feel that, I lost my race, they'll stay with their party.
All right, let's turn to the legislative race. We've got, I think, 12 incumbents. Does that automatically mean they're going to get back in that are running?
Not necessarily, but I have to echo Phil. I don't think people realize what kind of gumption it takes to run. And you're right. These people have put themselves out there. They're doing a lot of hard work, and we have to respect them for that, win or lose, because obviously, if they were going to put themselves out there to do this, they're going to have a political voice even into the future. And so we need to pay attention. We need to see their points of view. Just because you're incumbent doesn't mean that people are going to vote for you. I think this is an election of change in a big way. I think we're going to see some very interesting new dynamics in the legislature, and I think we're going to see some people who we thought were going to make it and didn't have to work so hard and realize that You know, you really do need to put in, that work. You need to get your message out there, and that's really it's gonna boil down to.
Phil, do all the incumbents get back in, and
No.
do the Democrats hold on to the majority?
No. I mean, what else did you expect me to say? No, I don't. I think the Republicans, we say all the time that we're going to take the majority. This time we're going to take the majority. We have some really excellent candidates. Tomorrow, I think all the incumbents will get past the primary, especially on the Republican side, because we only have 16 people running, whereas I think on the Democrat side it's 20, 23.
Yes.
So probably all the incumbents will make it through there, but I don't, because there's a lot of good faces that have come up, newer faces, even if they're former legislators, have come up, and this is a good ballot for us. And we have, like, Tom Fisher's a great candidate. Malfunction is a great candidate. And because not only does everybody know him, but he's very open and says what he wants to say, and people appreciate that. And he's talking about issues as opposed to, oh, my dear people of Guam type of stuff. That doesn't talk to issues, just trying to get your tug on your heart or something like that. But so I think there'll be some incumbents rightfully won't get reelected, perhaps on both sides. I hope just not on the Republican side and just on the Democrat side. But we have a chance for a good change in the legislature, positive change in the legislature, because they really did let the governor not get away, but let the governor do whatever she wanted to do. And I don't think it was an effective second branch or the third branch of government in counterbalancing the administration.
Ron, how do you think the incumbents are going to fare?
Well, first, I do like Daryl too, so I will agree with that. I've been on and off of this desk with you guys for almost 26 years. We've seen 3 speakers not get reelected. We're not just talking incumbents, 3 speakers of the legislature. So, I mean, anything can happen in politics. And, you know, and we've seen plenty of people who are incumbents not even make it past the primary. And so really it's a very interesting set of dynamics. And I think that in general, incumbency is not the golden ticket to anything. You still have to work hard, and you still have to you know, there's an old saying from Tip O'Neill, he wrote a whole book on it, all politics is local. If you get into office and if you stop working for the people are going to find out and chase you down by not voting for you.
Yep, I agree.
I think it really speaks well to the health of our democratic institution here on Guam. The fact that people really are paying attention. And like Phil said, you know, we live on a very small island. We all have to run in and deal with each other. I think politics becomes so personal for people because you really see the effects like right outside your front door, sometimes even inside your house. So, you know.
All right. We're going to have to take one more break and we'll be back with to wrap this show up. Please stay with us. All right, welcome back to our final few minutes of the show. Did you guys talk about who's going to win the majority? Who do you think is going to win the majority in the legislature?
Of course, Democrats are going to
Yeah, and why?
the majority.
Of course, you're going to say that, but why?
Well, I think a lot of people also recognize the fact that when you reach a critical stage, you kind of want, and this is kind of traditional in Guam politics, you kind of want to keep a lot of the people so that there's this institutional knowledge. I think people are going to fall back to that sort of mindset. But that's not to say that there isn't going to be a shakeup. I think there is going to be. We have a lot of interesting new candidates, and again, the legislature really reflects the constituency, and I think the constituency has changed. I think people who were not necessarily political now, because of the situation with COVID and other experiences, now they are. And that's a good thing. And so I think those kinds of new type of voters are gonna show themselves in the kinds of candidates that we get.
Phil, why do you think the Republicans are going to win the
We have better
majority?
candidates.
It boils down to Is there an issue that like abortion, for example? I mean, Republicans tend to be pro-life, correct? So is that going to be a deciding factor?
People like Talena and some other of the co-sponsors of whatever that bill is called.
The hard beget.
Yes, and so Guam is, I mean, if the abortion issue in Guam, I don't think is the same as it would be in Berkeley.
Yeah.
But still, there are sides to it. I think the issue again is that everybody knows, but fewer addressing it, is crime and drugs. And drugs, I think it's not the economic issues so much that lead to the crime. I think it's the drug issues that lead to the crime. And there's so many people. Ice is a terrible drug. I'm glad it wasn't around when I was in my 20s. And those are the issues. The economy, we keep handing out free money. That's why it's hard to get workers, because why should I work? I'm still getting money. I'm his godfather. You just send him to me. I get $500 a month type of a mentality, which keeps people out of the office, not for COVID reasons, because they're getting paid elsewhere. So I think the economy is an issue, and we can better address that as Republicans. But I'm going to get back to drugs and crime, and whoever addresses that better will win.
Ron, you got a prediction for the legislative majority?
Well, I think V.O. Key in the 1930s came up with this thing called critical election theory. I think it's related to political jobs. When you have a Democrat governor, the executive political jobs go to the executive, the legislature turns Republican. When you have a Republican governor, the legislature turns Democrat, because there's no political jobs for the Democrats in the executive. So I think that's what it's linked to. So it depends on, for me, the legislature is going to turn Republican either this election or the next election, depending on a number of factors.
You're right about the money thing. That's why I jokingly say that the difference between Frank Goggin, Dorsey, and Felix, and Carl and Rodriguez endorsing the governor is about $150,000 each year. I'd endorse her too if she's paying
Let's
that.
move on to the congressional race real quickly now. What are your assessment of the candidates on the Democrat and including the Republican challenger?
Well, again, it takes a lot of gumption to put yourself out there. I think they bring very different views to the office. And we have to remember that it's a twofold thing. One, this person is supposed to represent the views of the people of Guam to the United States, but also in a lot of ways, it's vice versa. And I think that we can't really put that local spin on what we expect from a candidate. We have to also remember who is the candidate that's going to get us the most bang for our buck, Washington to Hagåtña instead of Hagåtña to Washington. So it's going to be very interesting, because you have they're all seasoned politicians by now, and they bring very different points of view. So it's going to be interesting who the people of Guam are going to select.
Phil, you were very involved in getting the last Republican congressional delegate, Ben Blas, into office. What do you think about the prospects for Jim Wiley?
I think Jim's going to win. Let's see what Talana and former Speaker Wampat do, because one of them is going to have their feelings, rightfully they're going to feel upside down for a while, and what are they going to do? Because I know when Talana put her candidacy in, and I think they're somewhat surprised that Judy came out after that and said, I'm going to run anyway. And there's the feeling that Judy is Governor Lou's candidate, and I expect that Governors Lou's people are going to really get behind Judy, and if that's so, then I don't know where Talana's going to go after that. I'm sure Jim will try to, since he already has a relationship with her since they served together, he will try to get her over on his side. And same thing with Judy, but I think Judy's so Democrat, I think she'd stay at Democrat side and help Talana. But I think Jim's going to do it. Judy, of course, has a completely different view on the military buildup, or just our relationship with America, period. And I think than Jim's, and I think the people of Guam really are pretty pro-American, and that will help them a lot. When we say we got to settle our status, we've already voted on that by the number of Chamorros we have living in the States who said, I'm going to go
sitting
there.
next to the chairman of the Commission on Decolonization, so he might have a bit of a different view, but we don't have time for that. I've got to finish up with you, Ron. Is it going to be Talana, or is it going to be Judy Wampat?
Well, I think, we'll know, of course, tomorrow, but there's another key thing about these congressional delegate seats I'd like to mention very quickly. We need to ask the U.S. Congress and the President to take away our delegate and give us a resident commissioner. A resident commissioner serves for 4 years rather than 2 years. Puerto Rico has one.
right.
The Philippines had one. It worked much better for us, in my view. The other thing we need to ask the U.S. Congress to do is to at least give us a voice or a seat in the U.S. Senate. because that's where half the action happens in Congress, and we're totally not represented there.
Are you running?
I don't know why anybody would want to run for Washington.
Wish we had more time, but we don't. But we will have all our coverage tomorrow. Make sure to tune in to KOAM News for primary election coverage. Watch out, election night coverage on KOAM TV8, streaming on our Facebook or YouTube pages beginning at 10:30 p.m. on Saturday, tomorrow, August 27th. Listen to our simulcast on 93.9 FM. Follow us on any of our social media platforms for updates and results as they become available. Watch, we're going to be live all night long, folks, so please tune in to KOAM. I'm Nestor Licanto. This is Adrian, that's Phil, that's Ron. Thanks for watching.
Good luck,
see you
candidates.
tomorrow night.
Let's go.